Good morning, everybody. How are you doing? Morning. It's great to be here in London, and I'm super excited. I'm glad Bernie talked about the orange seats. That's our company color, so I'm pretty jazzed about that. It's 1 in the morning my time, so I asked the team, try to find a place that's really dark and have it, give me slides that are really dark. And so I was kind of falling asleep in the back, although that presentation was amazing, but I was, just get a little warm in here. So maybe, I thought I'd never do this. Bernie always does this, and I think it's lame, but can everybody just stand up? Because I think if you're like me, you just want to get your blood going a little bit. It's a little bit warm in here, and I think we've had you sitting there for a while, and I'd hate to have anybody fall asleep on my watch. Although it is okay to take selfies if you want to turn and take a selfie with me on the stage or anything like that while I'm presenting, go ahead and do that. All right, everyone feel good? You can sit down now. Well, that was great. Dr. Redmond, I thought, did an amazing job. We love to bring people to our presentations like this that talk about the generational gaps. And the reason we do that is because there's 2 remotes up here. Do they both work? Yeah, perfect. The reason we do that is because exactly is in the incentives business. If you haven't figured that out by now, that's what we do. And I think just as he talked about the 5 generations that are in the workforce, that we have representation here from the 5 generations. And I think that what we challenge our customers a lot on is recognizing the differences between those generations. And I think Dr. Redmond did a great job of illuminating a lot of them. But there's a lot more to be had there as you dig deeper and deeper into what motivates the different generations. And so we spend a lot of time with our customers trying to help them understand that you have to think about the people that you're paying and pay differently. And so we'll talk as we go through this, about different data that we have and things that we provide our customers with so that we can help you pay differently. So many folks that we work with, when we first start talking to them, everything is kind of homogenous. So a single plan is more defined by this is an AE2 plan, not at all defined by the fact that you might have 3 different generations on that AE2 plan. And so don't feel bad if anything I say, you're sitting there going, yeah, we're making all those mistakes. You're in good company. Still, 80% of the world generally is using spreadsheets to manage the problem of compensation, to my great dismay. So, but that's what we're here to do, and we'll talk about that. I thought the comment, I made a note of the comment that he made about, most people think about selling things that you can drop on your foot. I thought that was a great example, and something to think about as you think about your businesses. What are you selling, and how are people thinking about the motivations behind getting them to sell more of it? I think is really interesting. And I think he might have left the room, but I was going to make a comment on his on the internship for Max. We're big into internships, and we start them really young, so it's possible that we could work that out for him. Okay, so let's get started. I think, as I say, I love incentives. I've been in the compensation space for about 25 years. I founded exactly in 2005, so it's been a long time, and we've done a lot of great things. I like to think that I basically have the best job in the world. I absolutely love my job. And the reason I love my job is that I get to basically spend it talking to cool companies that are doing amazing things. And as Bernie said earlier, you're going to hear from a lot of those companies. I'm going to bring 2 up on the stage here in a little bit, and we'll get to kind of have a fireside chat, and you'll hear from them directly. But I thought I would share with you just a couple of examples. I think one of them is in the room here. But the thing about compensation, whenever I'm talking to initial groups or organizations or people about what I do, a lot of times they just think about, traditional sales comp. You think about the sales rep that we all know and love, and how do we pay 5%, up to 100% on what they sell, and then some kicker above that. And they really sort of genericize this down to being, kind of a brain dump. And I think what I get excited about is going into organizations and hearing about paying differently. I mean, I think, when Republic Services came to us, they were talking about motivating people on trash bins. And, those are the kind of things that I always love, because 15 years ago when we started the company, I too was guilty of thinking only about sales reps in that traditional way, right? I wasn't thinking about, Hyatt, for example, is a great customer of ours all over the world, and they pay wedding planners. So if you go to a Hyatt anywhere in the world to plan your wedding and you walk in, every decision you make, from the cake to the venue to the hors d'oeuvres to the room, on and on, there's incentives behind the scenes through exactly to motivate them. this Rush Medical is another one I really love, because the measure for me is always like, I try to think back 15 years ago, God, would I have ever thought that when we started this company, we'd be helping pay almost 1,000 doctors? Because how do you incentivize doctors, right? That's a little bit scary if you think about it. I mean, what are you incentivizing them on? Like faster surgeries, things like that? I mean, that would be kind of scary. But it's not that, thankfully. It's things like reduced wait times in the lobby. Dr. Redmond talked about the generation that doesn't mind sitting and waiting, but most of us do. And there's a direct correlation between wait times and customer happiness or satisfaction. Other things like how much they're getting written up in the periodicals and things. Those are things that the doctors get incentivized to do. And so even things like how long somebody's on a wait list for a new kidney. So this is really cool stuff. At least it is to me. Maybe I'm just a comp geek, but when I think about, I get excited about that. I think about helping doctors treat their patients better, not so much in the operating room, but outside the operating room, and just making the doctors better and more accountable in a lot of senses. And then finally, Australia Post. I think there's somebody here from Australia Post. Are you here? Wave a hand somewhere. There he is. Thank you for making the trip. I love the Australia Post story because, again, it's one of those that I would never have thought of. When the reps came to me and said, hey, we're thinking about selling this very large deal to thousands and thousands of people that work for Australia Post. And I'm like, really? I can't understand that. Like, who are they paying? We don't do the U.S. Post Office. I mean, who would they possibly be paying? But then you think about it and then you learn more and you realize it's a real problem, right? Australia is known for this vast geography. There's thousands of people out there, throughout the country. And a lot of them just, when they hang a shingle and they say, we're going to sell stamps or we're going to collect mail, to the Australia Post Office, that looks like a sales rep, right? They probably don't call them sales reps, but to us and to, from the higher level, it looks like a sales rep. We're going to pay them a commission for representing them out in some remote location to sell stamps, and I'm probably dumbing it down, but collect the mail and do all those things. I just think that's a really cool usage. And the reason I like to start with these kinds of examples is I like to try to get your mind thinking differently, right? Like you might be sitting here as a customer or a prospect, or even a partner, thinking about the way that you do it today. If I do nothing else from my presentation this morning, my hope is that you walk away maybe kind of thinking about something a little bit differently. Maybe you came in here to say, hey, I want to figure out how to automate the compensation for my AE2 plan. Of course we can talk about that. Of course we're going to do that. But to be honest, that's not as exciting. And so I'd rather have you walk out with the exciting stuff that's going on in our space. And I want to share that with you because nobody's more excited about the changes that are happening in our space than me. When we started the company, as I say, 15 years ago, the whole world was using Excel spreadsheets to manage compensation. And our focus in the world was to focus around the incentive comp space. And I'll talk in a minute about how we're different there. But anyway, I just wanted to point out the customers that we have. There's too many to mention. We have over 1,600 globally. Our very first customer was Salesforce.com. Today, they're our largest customer and longest standing customer. And it's exciting for me to see a company like that where we started with less than 300 reps 15 years ago. And today, we pay almost 20,000 people within Salesforce. So it's just an incredible relationship. And we have many, many examples like that. And I would encourage you, as Bernie did, that throughout the day today, everyone's got their name tags. Just go up to somebody that's a customer and ask them about their experience, ask them how they're doing it, and try to learn from that because that's a big part of why we bring everybody together. To some extent, you might be saying, and my wife says this to me, Chris, I think you've kind of failed at this. You've been at it for 15 years, even though you've built this pretty cool company. You went public on the New York Stock Exchange, and but the facts of the matter is some recent data from CSO Insights, 69% is the average performance of our revenue targets. That's your average performance, not exactly. This is just across sales organizations. Average quota attainment is 53%. So to put it in terms of what sort of what I've been talking about, if you were going to have a surgery, how would you feel about a surgery that had about a 1 in 2 chance of success? Right? You probably wouldn't do that. If you were going to go and have a steak somewhere or a hamburger, would you go to a restaurant where you had a 69% chance of not getting food poisoning? Right? You probably wouldn't. Right? So the question is, to me, why do we accept this kind of mediocrity? Why are people accepting this when you wouldn't accept these kind of performance numbers anywhere else in your life, and yet it seems to be totally acceptable in the world of sales compensation that these are the performance metrics that companies are living with. My belief, my strong belief, and I think the facts bear it out, is you all are the smart people, right? Most of you. And that's because you're here, right? Either you've chosen to do automation already and you've gotten off these spreadsheets, or you're about to do that. Either way, you're the smart people. The other 80% of the people that are out there are just happy, they think, paying in Excel with known error rates and all the things that are bad about these manual systems, and they're not even thinking differently about how to compensate, let alone thinking about the 5 generations that might be in your organization and how, if you pay them all the same, sort of shame on you, right? You're going to get these kinds of results. I'm not blaming the generational thing for these results, but that's certainly a contributing factor. And the smartest companies, some of which we'll have on the stage here in a bit, are the companies that are really taking comp to the next level, and they're not even thinking about how to pay that AE2 plan. They're thinking globally about their organization and how they change how they think about a much broader area. And so let me talk about that for a minute. As I say, 15 years ago when we started the company, it was all about ICM, Incentive Compensation Management. We built a public company solving the incentive compensation management problem. That's how big this problem is, and we still have only touched the tip of the iceberg in terms of the number of companies that are still doing this manually, and we'll talk about the benefits of moving off of that. But how did we get here? How did we get to where we are today? And what you're going to see and hear from me and from the guests that come up, as well as Arnab, who's our head of products that we'll talk a little bit later, you'll hear less about just ICM and more about SPM, this broader, and where the market is going, because that's really where things are going. And so what I like to do is share with you how we got there, because I think it's instructive on what we're doing today and where we're going. And I think it could be instructive potentially for you, not only in your business life, but maybe in your personal life. And what I mean by that is, what you see here is 3 different things. They're neat graphics, but what it's meant to show you is the first thing on the left is this idea of self-assessment. It's that looking yourself in the mirror and really saying, how am I doing at this, right? And again, this is where I say you could do this in your personal life or your business life, but this is what we did, and this is what our customers did in the early days when they were thinking about compensation. And looking in the mirror and saying, am I doing a good job at this? Am I in that slide that says average performance is 53 or 69%? Because if I'm anywhere near that, I have to be able to do better than that. I mean, that's just not okay, right? So what kinds of things can we do to do different? The second area is my favorite, and that's this idea of suspending disbelief. I'm in the process of writing my second book. The first book is called Game the Plan, shameless plug. You can get it on Amazon or call your local sales rep and we can get you a copy. Maybe even autograph. But so the second book is a lot about suspending disbelief, and the reason is because I keep blending this personal life versus your business and even your comp life, and it's because this is how I've had success in my life to the extent that I've had some success, and that is this idea of suspending disbelief. There's so many people in your life, personally and professionally, that will tell you things can't be done. Oh, we can't do that. We've never done that. This can't be changed. What you're suggesting, Chris, won't work, on and on and on. And my strong counsel to you or advice to you is to not hang around people that are like that, A, and B, since they're everywhere, it's inevitable you're going to hear that. But in your mind, be able to suspend that disbelief. When I started this company, there were so many naysayers that were saying, Chris, you can't do this. And why? Because of this third thing. Hard to see on the slide, but you see that little CD-ROM. That's what I was selling before I started exactly. I was selling compensation solutions on a CD, like everybody else, by the way. At that time, Siebel and other companies like that. It was all on-premise software, and I don't want to age myself too much because that's that ship has sailed, and you all get that story of moving to the cloud. The point of the story is not that the cloud's the future. I think we all get that. The point of the story is the naysayers were telling me it can't be done, and we built a whole company around it by suspending disbelief, not believing them, literally, and moving on to create a great company in ICM. What we then did is we said, okay, that's wonderful, and it's exciting, and we have all these cool customer scenarios and examples that I gave, and many, many more. In fact, 1,600. How can we apply that same thinking and build this out to a bigger space? And the reason was, when we would go in and talk to companies and say, why is it that you're still on spreadsheets? What is going on? I'll tell you something amazing. This is not part of my presentation, but it just occurred to me. So we do this thing in our company. It's a process by looking at the 90,000 prospects that are in our database. And it's for our salespeople to help them identify who they should, prioritize their conversations with. Who are the A's that they should go prioritize? And so we use these data scientists, and I'll talk about data science in a minute, but luckily we have some on staff. And so we ask them to look at the data in this vast amount of information and try to help us identify which of the 90,000 companies and prospects that are in our data set are the ones that our reps should go immediately talk to. And you know what was one of the most, there was like 5 things or 4 things that caused companies to stand out to become an A. And one of the things was if they had already had at least 2 or 3 failed sales cycles. So think about that for a minute, right? I mean, I was a sales rep growing up and through the years. If I had had 2 failed attempts to sell somebody something, the last thing I would do is call them back as the top priority customer. But yet, our data suggests, shows that, in fact, those are some of the best leads that we have in the, I'm sorry, I'm going to get some water here, in the data set. I think that's really interesting. And I think that, and I know that the reason that is because I talk to these customers, and when we say things like, why would you possibly be doing this on spreadsheets, given all of the known error rates in spreadsheets and all the bad things that are related to spreadsheets? And what we would find is that the problem is people recognize that comp is this one cog in the wheel, that there's all these things that go into compensation and out from compensation that also need to be fixed. And so a lot of times that process of looking at the whole, what we now know as SPM, was overwhelming to people, and that was one of the reasons that caused them to sort of throw up their hands and not pull the trigger and make a decision on ICM. And so that was really interesting data for us to understand, and we use that data instructively to help us decide, you know what, we need to expand what we do. We cannot just be an ICM company. We need to be and embrace this SPM company, because the things that are feeding into ICM, like the first thing you do is your sales planning, figuring out how many people are we going to hire, when are we going to hire them, what's the ramp going to be, all those kinds of things. So, we discovered that a lot of those are the inputs to the compensation system. And if those are all broken, then a lot of the data that's coming in is corrupt and not good. And we know what happens when you have systems that are data dependent and the data coming into them is not very good. And so what we did when we went and talked to customers, we said, how do you handle sales planning today, for example? And we learned that they basically use spreadsheets. It's a once-a-year project that's done at the very end of 1 year as they go into the new year. Once it gets approved, they put it in a drawer and they move on. And it's kind of like, God, in today's world, with today's technology and some of the things that Dr. Redmond was talking about, how can we possibly operate with that kind of scenario? You have to have a system that's going to constantly throughout the year be checking and telling us if we're off course, if we've hired to the plan, if the ramps that we estimated or guesstimated, we would have, are they actually happening? Or maybe we aren't hiring to the plan and we need to fix that kind of stuff. Most companies do not have a sophisticated planning system, and so there's no early warning sign. There's nothing for them to really track unless they're really going to be smart enough to pull that Excel spreadsheet out every once in a while and look at it, which we know you're too busy to do that. So sales planning was one of the first things that we recognized as being kind of the starting point of this SPM program. And then we said, hey, what's the next thing that you need before you get to the comp? Well, now that you've figured out how many reps you're going to hire, you've figured out what their territories are going to, what their hiring ramps are going to be and what their productivity expectations are, you got to figure out what their territories are now. And again, we would go, how do you guys do territories today? And it's archaic the way that companies are creating territories, especially when you think about the changes in how we sell and what we sell. It's not only the things that you drop on your foot, right? A lot of these territory companies, and our system is no different. It's great if you have, if you talk about windshield time, right? I remember as a young rep, I was selling for an ophthalmology company, and they talked about windshield time. And what they meant was, I had a bunch of accounts I had to go visit, and so I had to, drive to each one. And so most of my time was driving around, and so it was important to pick a territory that made sense for my drive. And by the way, that still is very important today for the companies that have products that are serviced in that way. But guess what? A lot of them aren't that way. I mean, today for our sales reps, we could care less about them driving around. Right? The territories could be totally non-geographic. You don't have to worry about them being all in one zip code, for example. The point being, you needed a territory system to create smart territories and be able to figure that stuff out. And that's why we got into the territory business. That was what helped us with the inputs that go into the incent system, and it's been a huge change because we now can help our customers control and cleanse the data from the beginning of the process all the way through the compensation process. And that's a game changer, and you're going to hear a lot about that today. And then I'll talk about the optimization stuff in just a minute. I was watching a show the other day, and I saw one of a world speaker. I won't name him because I try to stay away from politics and piss everybody off. But he said something like, the pace of change has never been this fast in the world. And I was like, that is so true. I mean, it's, you heard Dr. Redmond talk about that as well. The pace of change right now has never been this fast. But the second part of what he said I thought was even more interesting. He said, but it will never be this slow again. And that's the part that, kind of was like, wow, that's incredible. And I'm a Gen Xer, so I was guilty of a lot of the Gen X things that he was talking about. But to think, as a leader of an organization, that is echoing through my head right now. As I had the long flight over, I kept thinking about, gosh, everyone's complaining in the organization that we're going so fast and we're doing so many things, and and thinking that, guess what? This is the new normal, and it's only going to get worse. So how do we figure out how to systematize more of these manual sort of tasks? And it kind of got me, thinking about, how we think about our business and how I personally manage my personal career. I think one of the things in my world as a founder of a tech company in Silicon Valley, the life expectancy of a tech founder is not very good. And the reason it's not very good is because the skill sets that it takes to get a company an idea and think about, hey, I want to start a company, and to go get your initial round of A and this kind of thing, and then get that initial $10 million in sales, that's a very distinct type of person and personality that it takes to do that, okay? Usually, the person that then has to take it from 10 million to 50 million, it's a different skill set, right? You're not as concerned about going out and getting funding because now people want to throw money at you. It's a very different skill set to take it to 50 million. And this goes on and on. And so it's kind of this idea that what got you here is not going to get you there. And I think, again, I hate to preach at you. I don't mean to do that, but I think, I have two young, kids, not that young anymore. They're in their 20s. One works at the company, and I'm constantly trying to coach them on how to think about their career. And one of the things that I just think is important in your personal life and in your business life, as you think about SPM and comp, is constantly having this echo in your head that what got me here is not going to get me there. And I truly think it's the only reason I'm standing here today, because again, I'm not saying I'm special. There's plenty of CEOs that are founders, like Zuckerberg. You saw him earlier on the pictures, and those are total unicorns. I'm not suggesting anything like that. But again, the reason that a lot of the CEOs are able to stick with it is they change, and they recognize that if they don't get mentors and they don't figure out how to change and how to do things differently, then they are going to get bypassed. And so anyway, this thinking for us is what got us to come up with this new business that we have, this SPM business. We acquired 3 companies that helped us get there, and we've spent $120 million building a lot of the stuff that you're going to see later on in the day. And it's helped us figure out this, what we call the maturity model of SPM. And I'll spend a few minutes on this and give you some examples, because I think this is really important. I think if I just build this out, we have people in the audience that are customers, obviously, and we have people in the audience that are prospects. Most of our prospects are in stage 1 of the maturity model, because they're on, by definition, they're on spreadsheets or manual systems. Okay, and we're not going to pick on them because we love them and we're happy that they're here and they are the smart people. But But these are the people that are understanding the pain of spreadsheets. You know, if you've been following Gartner or any of the big analysts, I've been following them for years in this space, and they constantly reconfirm there's almost up to 10% known error rate in these systems. So just think about that in and of itself, okay? You are probably paying, let's say you're a Salesforce that has 200 people, and I won't use pounds because I can't do the math. So if you're paying those people $100,000 or equivalent per year, you're talking about a $10 to $20 million cost center if you're paying them between $50,000 and $100,000. That's just a Salesforce of 200. We have many, many companies that are paying thousands and tens of thousands of people. So the math just gets, you know, even more enormous. So when you talk about a 10% known error rate, that's really problematic. And so some people, I've had people say, well, but Chris, it kind of comes out in the wash because the errors, half of them are in our favor and half of them are in, you know, the rep's favor. And it's like, nope, that's not true. Because what happens in these manual systems, right? We often hear our customers refer to their reps as little accountants because they're keeping their own spreadsheets. They're keeping you honest. And when they find mistakes that are in their favor, they just assume that you're correct. But when they find mistakes that are in the company's favor, they report them and they get them fixed, right? So the error rate problem is compounded by the fact that you have all these little auditors out there that are fixing all the ones that are in your favor. And so, and what I think is funny is when I talk to people over the years, and we get into this whole dialogue about error rates and things like that, I kind of laugh because that's actually the least important ROI of doing automation, right? By far and away, the most important reason to automate is that this is all about the belief that compensation drives behavior. If you don't believe in the dangling carrot, if you didn't believe in the dangling carrot, you wouldn't be here, and we would be out of a job. So we know by definition that you're here, you believe in the dangling carrot, and we know, by the way, that by definition, all the companies that are paying on some type of variable comp, which is almost every company, that they believe in the dangling carrot. The question in my mind is, then why aren't they dangling it? Because if you have an automated system that's only paying people, you know, 4 to 6 weeks in arrears, and there's no web-based real-time access on that mobile phone, which I always call a PDA, and I get yelled at for that too. If the reps can't see that and understand moment to moment how they're doing, then you're not dangling the carrot and you're not utilizing those millions or tens of millions of dollars that you're using in compensation to drive your business. And worse, if your competitors are, you're at a decided disadvantage from your competition. And so for those of you that are in stage one, I'm touching on a couple that are really, really big, like slap in the face, you got to do this, whether it's with Exactly, I'm not pressing you there, but to get off of spreadsheets is absolutely the first phase of the maturity model. So then what? Then we get to phase 2. And this is my favorite phase because this is where most of our customers are, to be honest, or a high percentage of our customers are. And it's wonderful because these are the smart folks that have figured it out and they've gotten off of spreadsheets and they've automated. The problem here is trying to get these smart folks to recognize that that you're doing something different for a reason, right? It's like constantly we'll go in and we'll talk to companies and I'll show up and I'll be meeting with a senior executive and we'll say, you know, what are you trying to do? And tell me about your business and blah, blah, blah. And, you know, my favorite term when I'm sitting with a CEO or a head of sales is, hey, if you could wave a magic wand and pay any different way, forget about how you pay today. If you could wave a magic wand and get your reps to do 3 things, what would it be? And immediately that executive knows what the 3 things are. They never question it. They just never delay. Like, let me think about that. It's always, and it's different all the time, which is even cooler. It's not always the same thing. I mean, it's not always that I want them to sell more stuff. Because the question is, what activities would you want them to do differently? And it's always things like, I'd want them to discount less. I'd want them to sell all the products instead of, you know, just one product. It's things like that. And I'll say, okay, great. Well, do you pay that way today? Oh, no, we can't. We're hamstrung by the system. It's too manual. We can't do that. Great. Okay, so that's why you want to automate. Yeah, that's awesome. Let's do it. And we do the deal and we sign up. And guess what they do? They hand us the comp plans as they currently are, and they say, let's automate these comp plans. And we say, well, wait a second. Oh, I got ahead of myself. I'm going to hold that story for 1 second. I want to finish this piece. This is the 1 a.m. thing kicking in. So I'll come back to that in just 1 second. The third level is data-driven. So you might have seen in the center of that SPM value chain that we have a lot of data. So I'll talk about how data is really the second to last area where customers receive enlightenment. And the final area of total enlightenment is when they recognize the power of AI. And hopefully AI and ML is a term you've all heard over and over, probably misused, and you're probably sick of it, but you're going to hear it today because this will change your life, okay? So now let's get back to my story. So phase 1 I already talked to you about. Phase 2 is this automation, and this is where I was telling my story. And this slide is my favorite. I almost had this be the name of the book, but they talked me out of it because most of my team hates this story. But I love this. I grew up on a farm, and the first time I heard this from my mom, I was probably 8 years old or something, and it was like, what are you talking about? Pave the cow paths, I don't get it. And no one ever gets it, but I like it because when the light bulb finally goes on, you're going to go, oh, that's kind of cute. So the point is, they hand me that comp plan, which is the cow path, and they say automate it. Automate this comp plan. And I'm like, yeah, but I met with the CEO, and he or she told me that they want to do all these other things. They wanted to use all this powerful automation to pay differently, to drive a different outcome than they currently have. Oh yeah, but we can't do that. That's way too hard. The VP of sales will never allow that. That's that whole suspend disbelief thing, right? They don't like change. People don't like change, and this is certainly true of sales leadership, of which I've been, and CFOs and all the people in the chain of command that are paying these tens of millions of dollars out. Right? Change is scary because what if you make a change that causes a runaway train, and all of a sudden I've just blew the commission budget. And so it's real. I'm not suggesting that the anxiety for change or lack of change isn't real. It's real. But this is your challenge, okay? If you're in phase 2 and you have figured out how to automate, and you've made that great decision to automate, I can't implore you enough to think about paying differently, using these powerful tools to do things different than the way you did them before. I mean, by definition, you're doing them differently in the sense that, by the way, even paving the cow path, even taking that tired 10-year-old plan that some VP of sales made because he or she had the loudest voice in the room, even automating that plan with all of its faults and providing the dangling carrot through the PDA device or the mobile phone or whatever you want to call it, that alone will cause your behavior to change and will improve behavior. And you'll see, we've seen this case over and over again with our customers, it improves performance. But I always kind of feel let down. I feel like, oh, geez, like you did all this great stuff and then you just paved the cow paths. Like, why? It just drives me crazy. And so anyway, so my challenge to you is don't do that. And if you're doing that, it's okay. But start thinking about how you can do something a little bit differently. And the first thing that you should do is talk to other customers and find out how to get into stage 3. By the way, one of the things about this maturity model that I'm talking you through, these 4 phases, is it's kind of intimidating if you're sitting there at stage 1, if you're on spreadsheets. And what happens is our reps are excited and they come in and they start talking to you about AI models and ML models and how you can do all this stuff with the data. And we see people's eyes roll back because they're like, oh my God, like I just need to get payroll out on time. Like your guys are freaking me out. You're talking about all this stuff. And I sort of tell my reps sometimes like, look, you got to be careful. It's like you've walked up to a person in the desert who hasn't had a drink in 5 days and you start talking about flavored water and colored this and just give them water. Like they just need water. Right? So just, convince them that automation, that's the first step. And so I'm not trying to, make you feel bad about being in stage 2. I want you to get to stage 2, but what's most important is that you recognize you cannot stop there. If you stop at stage 2 or phase 2, whatever we call it, I don't even know, level 2, you've kind of failed yourself and the company. And so it's okay to be there for some period of time. You might be there for a year or 2 or more. But what's important is that you be thinking about how do I get to the next phase. And the best way to think about phase 3 is, and I would talk to customers, and again, you're going to hear from some of them that are either there or on their way there, is data. Okay? So much of the, let's see, do I have, no, I'll come back to that. The other thing that's interesting in these levels, these 4 levels, is Bernie talked about this at the outset this morning. He talked about how careers are made oftentimes by being a hero in this area. We have example after example after example of we signed a deal many, many years ago with the comp administrator, and that comp administrator got religion, either through us or together, or we talked them through it, and they sort of got religion that just paving the cow paths is not going to work. And they championed that within their company. And one of the best ways to champion it is by talking about data, okay? So when we talked about, when I showed you the slide on the SPM value chain, and I showed you that we talked about doing planning and then territory management and then the compensation and all that stuff. In the center of that was data. Why is that so important? Well, when you think about our systems and what we do for our customers, it's all about data, right? We pull data, you pull data, when we do an implementation on average from 8 to 10 disparate sources. So we're always connecting to an HR data set, a products data set, the SKUs, obviously the order entry data set, and many times in these large multinational companies, there's multiples of those data sets. We're pulling all that data into the system in order to pay comp. But that data is extremely valuable when you think that if you pull up a level and you look at it from Xactly's standpoint, our customers agree, if they want, to have us aggregate and anonymize that data and allow them to use it as benchmarks to drive better decisions. And this is what I mean by using the data to help you make better decisions. One of the fun example I have here on Infor, the reason I have that is, so we started talking with the CFO at Infor, and he was a wonderful guy, and he had really big ideas, and so not that most CFOs don't, but he was talking to us not like a typical CFO. He was sort of non-traditional, I would say, and he was really thinking about how do we change the comp plans? I want data, I want territories, I want the whole enchilada, and I want to make this all work. And we were like, wow, this is crazy. Like, you are really thinking strategically. He's now the CEO of the company. Now, I'm not saying that that's because of us, although, draw your own conclusions. But the point is, this can help you in your career, and we don't want you to lose sight of that. We have people here in the audience I see that have made their careers in large part by being the champion inside their company for change, and recognizing that if you want to be a champion of change, there probably isn't a more impactful area in your company where that change could drive such a meaningful result. Because you're talking about an area that by definition is going to be tens to hundreds of millions of dollars. So you don't have to go make the case that your sales reps are going to go from 58 or 59% performance to 82. What if we just get them to 60? What's that 1% performance increase worth? What if we get them to change the discount percentage from an average of 33 to 32? What is that 1% worth to the bottom line? When you start talking that way to a CFO or a CEO, you are going to get their attention because it's big time dollars. So then your challenge is, what can we do from the compensation standpoint to drive that change? I'll give you a quick example in my company. So we used to always just pay on the net, right? And so if you sell something for $100,000 and you give a 10% discount, we would pay the rep on the $90,000, okay? The problem with that way of thinking is if you're a rep, and let's say, I'm just going to make numbers up, let's say you made $5,000 on the $100,000 deal, well, you're going to make substantially the same amount on a $90,000 deal, right? You might make $4,500. So you're likely to take that deal all day long. You don't really care. And so if the customer comes back and says, no, I want a 12% discount or a 15% discount, again, your mindset is, I'm substantially getting the same amount of commission, I'm going to just take that deal. But to the company, when you multiply that across 100 or 500 or thousands of reps, those dollars become extremely meaningful. And so we started looking at, hey, if our average discount is X, let's tighten up the range so that the rep feels pain, like real pain, for every percent of discount below kind of what we want, what is an acceptable range. And you wouldn't believe the change that happened in our company in terms of behavior. Because reps were all of a sudden not just thinking about the net dollars, they were actually focused on the discount percent. And so rather than discount in even numbers, well, 5's not an even number, but in our head, it's easy to do the math in 5s. So, if you're at 20% and they want 25, or they want a deeper discount, a lot of times the rep will just jump to 25 because they don't want to do the math on what the discount is at 22 or 21 or 21 and a half and do that in front of the customer in real time and try and look stupid. So they'll just pick another number, 25, it sounds like a round number. Think of how much that costs you as a company when reps think that way, and they do think that way, and they behave that way. You can change that behavior if you're paying different from 21 to 22 to 23 or even half point. So it's just an example of how you can dramatically change the bottom line with these kinds of systems. Infor is a great example. I think we're going to try to get them on stage at the Vegas thing, so you'll be able to hear the story there, but we'll be tracking that for you. So stage 4 is sort of, I think the nirvana. I think where stage 4 comes into play is I talked about the data. I talked about the fact that we can help you with benchmarks. We can use the hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of thousands of people that we pay across the globe in an aggregated and anonymized way. So nobody's seeing anything about anybody. We don't care about whether Susie sold it or Bobby sold it or what company. That's not important to us. What's important is, well, let me ask you rhetorically, would it be important for you to know that companies in your space or that are in your market or your size or public or private, you get to decide, what lens to look through. If you knew that you were 10 points under the average in performance, wouldn't you want to know that? Because it would at least cause you to say, that's weird. Like, are we really 10 points below the average? Like, why? Let's drill in deeper on that. So then you can start looking at individual types of reps. Maybe it's geographic, maybe it's something else. You could look at how many measures are on our plans versus the benchmark that we selected, right? And this benchmark is empirical data. So it's not like other benchmarks that you might buy where there's an error rate and all these, it's survey-based data. This is actual payment data that we have. So we can tell you in many ways exactly how, we can actually make recommendations to you on how to perform differently if you change certain things in your plan. I'll give you one quick example and then we'll move on. A lot of people come to us and they say, how many measures should we have on our comp plans? What's the right number of measures on a comp plan? And we see plans that have 10 measures regularly. A measure is just a thing, right? So if you're selling tennis shoes, it might be the color of the shoe, it might be what channel it went through, it might be the discount percentage, on and on and on, right? So we see plans all the time that have 10. And our gut reaction is to say to those people, geez, who designed this plan? Like, as nice as possible, this is really not smart. You should not be doing this. And sometimes people would get mad. And so now what's great is we say, don't kill the messenger. We have the data. It's not us that's telling you this. The data shows clear as day that the right number of measures on a plan is 3. And that plans that have more than 3, the performance starts to deteriorate. And when you get up in the numbers of 10, the performance as compared to the benchmark is terrible. It's horrible. And the reason is the reps can't figure it out. It's not that they're dumb, but they just don't care. They're not going to spend all this time trying to figure out all the ways you're trying to drive their behavior. So pick the 3 most important things. That's why when I talk to the CEO and I do the wave the magic wand test, I'm just asking him or her about the 3 things you'd want them to do. And if you built the comp plans based on what those 3 things were, and by the way, there's almost often, I would say, not alignment between what the CEO tells us or the head of sales even, and how the comp plans are actually doing. It's incredible the distance between them in many times. So what gets us into this final phase is the notion of AI, right? So it's one thing to show you data, which is critically important, empirical data, so you can do benchmarks and you yourself can run these benchmarks to see how you compare and stack up, as I've mentioned. But then there's another layer, which is to use the machines to tell us things that we can't see ourselves, that are less obvious, right? And so we, for example, had our data scientists look at the data, and we said, look, one of the things our customers struggle with is attrition of their sales people, quitting of the people, turnover. Turnover is a bad word here because you think of that as revenue, but people leaving. And we know there's been lots of studies done that the cost to replace a single rep is somewhere in the order of $150,000 to $200,000. The cost to rehire that rep, the ramp-up period that it takes for them to start selling, the training, on and on and on, it's very, very expensive. And so we said, well, look, we have all this data across 15 years by hundreds and hundreds of thousands of people that have been in these organizations. We can see when they attrit. We can see when they are hired. We can see what their ramps are. We know, again, generically across the base what the averages are and how that looks. And so we thought, let's feed a lot of information into one of these machine learning models and see what it spits out. Because the power of AI and ML is that I can't tell you why the results are what they are. It's not an algorithm. It's not an if-then statement. It doesn't say if a rep loses a deal and has no pipeline and has a lousy manager, they're gonna quit. It's not like that. It's like the machine sucks in all this data, everything you can imagine. There's 55 different data inputs into the machine that have everything to do with performance and managers and their ramps and their pipelines and many other things, 55 different things. But what it spits out is a graph that plots with dots all of your reps. It plots all these reps. So think in your mind of two axes, and you have 4 quadrants. Well, in the top right quadrant, those would be the first axis is their performance to date. So whether they're 0 or 100%, 120% or whatever their quota. And the other axis is the machine's belief on their likelihood to attrit. So immediately you get this report, and in the top right, if you see dots, those are your highest performers that have the highest propensity to leave you, right? Those are the people you do not want to leave the company. The dots on the bottom left are the poor performers that have no intention of leaving. Okay, so I don't know as a leader, like which one do I focus on first? Because they both piss me off, but I think I'm more pissed off about losing great performers in terms of urgency. And so, anyway, it's an example of AI that I think you should be thinking about because this is the future. Okay, this is where we're going 5 years from now. The data will be telling us everything. The data will be driving the decisions, and the machines will be creating this data. And if you get into machine learning and AI and all this stuff, and you learn from this specialist on this, what you will hear time and again is that the power is not in building the model. The power is in the data set that you have to put that model against. And that's where exactly is like nobody else. There's no one on the planet that has the data set that we have that we've been collecting for 15 years. And so it's really, really cool. Arnab will share, I think, with you some of the other ones we have. We have some AI models that are tied to that onboarding that I talked about, the ramp-up period, so we can help you with that. There's a whole bunch of other ones that we're working on, and so we'll share some of that stuff with you. But I think that's sort of the final phase of this thing, where you really are using the data models to be prescriptive on how you might want to change the way that you compensate. So I think I talked to that. Let me skip that. So this is my last slide before I bring up a couple guests. I think hopefully I've spurred some difference of thinking with you. You might now understand why, as Bernie said at the outset, we changed the name of this event to Unleashed, because we think it's all about unleashing human potential, right? So when I ask the question to that CEO to wave that magic wand, what he or she is answering without knowing it is, if you could unleash the human potential of your people, what are the 3 things you'd have them do? That's really what they're answering. That's what this is about. And so this show used to be called Comp Cloud for many, many years, because all we focused on was compensation, and it was cloud, that was new and interesting. Today, that's less interesting, right? That's why I'm not trying to diminish the people that are in step 1 and 2. Those are really important steps to be in, and congratulations to be even in there, because a lot of the world is not. But don't stop there. There's so much more to go if you really want to do this unleashing. So with that, what we thought we'd do is bring a couple of guests up to share the stage, and we can talk through. There we go. And so what I'd like to do is ask Hugh Murray and Sudhir Murthy to come on up. And while they're coming, I'll talk a little bit about them. So Hugh is at Global, really cool company. I was out here a while ago meeting with him and his team, talking about their challenge. And some of the things that they were doing that I found was so exciting was Global is working on on data transformation and how things happen in the world. So that he's giving this example. You guys can go ahead and sit down if you want, and then I'll let you guys introduce yourself in a second as well. Like if you get off a train and you walk by a billboard, their vision is that that billboard would recognize who you are based on geolocation of your phone and things like that, and advertise to you specifically or provide news to you specifically as you go through your day, which I thought was pretty amazing. He was talking about buses that were driving by could have all this stuff. So we'll get him to tell some more about that stuff. It's very, very exciting. And then Sudhir is at Schneider Electric. I love Sudhir's title because it says transformation in it, which is what we're all about. Schneider is a fantastic global customer of ours, and they are leading the digital transformation of energy management, which I personally am pretty excited about because I live in California, and I don't know if it's made the news out here, but they keep shutting our power off because of the fires that happen there. And the reason that that's happening is not because they care so much about us and isn't this wonderful management to make sure the fires don't spread. It's because they have a lousy infrastructure, and the infrastructure is so bad, and the systems that bring the energy are so bad that they have to literally turn off the power to thousands and thousands and tens of thousands of people in California, and everybody's up in arms and they're furious about it. And while Schneider won't fix all that, there are pieces of that with their digitization that will help us. So I hope you can do that in California. I'll give you my address so you guys can fix that. So let's get started. Why don't Hugh? You start? Introduce yourself maybe again and tell us a little bit about your company.
No worries. Well, my name's Hugh Murray. I'm the Regional Operations Director at Global, and our business. And it just serves to remind in the pace of change. 2 or 3 years ago, I'd have said, hey, I work for a radio station, a radio group, and we've got some radio brands. You might have heard of them, Classic FM, Heart, etc. But over the last 3 years, our business has just changed dramatically through acquisition, through the change in the political environment in terms of legislation over radio licenses, the input of digital technology, and we've been at the forefront of building some new digital products. And most recently, we've just moved into the outdoor advertising space as well, which again, as a real Generation Xer, I think of outdoor as posters, but in the last year, I've found this amazing world of digital outdoor advertising. So our business has moved, and the business is now just called Global, and it's about really offering a multimedia solutions business for advertisers predominantly, stretching from John O'Groats to Land's End, but now with our digital audio exchange product, which allows digital ad insertion onto Deezer, Soundboo, Audio Cloud, podcasting, etc. We can take clients' messages and put them into these audio streams, and we've taken that around the world. So we've got some new offices in the States, we've got offices in Europe, and that allows our advertisers to go truly global. So our whole business has just been transforming. So I now work for Global as opposed to working for a radio station, and that's been an amazing journey and an amazing change.
That's great. And Sudhir, why don't you introduce yourself as well and tell about your company?
Sure. So I work with Schneider Electric, and I think the best way to talk about Schneider is to say who we are not. We are not the lift-making company. We're not Schindler. We are not the trucking company. We are one of the largest companies in the world that probably people have not heard of. We are the engine that drives a lot of the Facebook data centers and some of these cloud data centers in terms of how we keep it up and running 24 hours a day. And from everything from hospitals to hotels to infrastructure, we are manufacturing most of the equipment that's behind the scenes. I think for you at home, if you ever go down to the basement and you take a look at your circuit breaker, probably you're going to see Schneider Electric or one of the companies we acquired. That's where you probably have run into Schneider.
That's great. Well, thanks again for you guys being great customers. Hugh, why don't I start with you? So you were quoted yesterday in talking about how compensation has been a game changer for your business. Maybe you could elaborate on why you said that.
Yeah, well, it was my job. I sort of was responsible for managing the compensation plan probably for the last 10 years. And I thought we did a pretty good job. We had a reasonable scheme. The retention was kind of where we wanted it to be. And I thought one day I'd reach out and I would ask, I did it through LinkedIn. I put a simple message on LinkedIn, said, who's got a contemporary commission scheme that, because I was thinking we needed to change. Our business was changing and we needed to change with it. So I put that on LinkedIn. My God, honestly, I had responses from Deloitte in Australia, you name it. I had Oracle Data Systems, met up with some of the guys from Exactly and what have you. And they were all talking about compensation schemes that were just mind-boggling. I had a scheme where you got your target, you hit your target, you got paid. It was as simple as that. What was more complicated? What more did you need out of a compensation scheme? So I went out and I met a few of these guys, and it blew me away because it suddenly showed how in the sales, in the sales funnel and in your lifetime loyalty of a client, how different clients had different loyalties, different profitability schemes. There was all sorts of things that I could look at, and this was eye-opening for me. It was absolutely eye-opening, and I ended up in Salesforce, and I thought, well, we're a big customer of Salesforce's, and I'll go and have a chat with them. And I thought, they'll have a product or whatever, and I discovered that these guys were using it Exactly, and they showed me the visualization. And so an account manager could see where they were. Our guys opened a pay packet, when they got paid, and that's probably the first time they actually found out what they were going to earn. So to be able to see, and also to be able to see what the potential earning could be, that was amazing. I was in. That was it. I kind of realized I was a dinosaur, and I had a hell of a lot to learn. And that's the process and the journey that that we've been on, and it's changing, real game changing.
I love it. We'll talk more about that. So Sudhir, I mentioned earlier, you have this transformation in your title. So how does that tie into the things you guys are doing from a comp standpoint?
Sure. We have a company program that's from the customer side, I talk about the digitization. On the employee side as well, we're talking about Step Up, empowering people, and it's part of this HR transformation of where we are trying to get people to be empowered to do the right thing. This is an important one because till we have Exactly on board, it's more a back office exercise. Somebody's putting something on, and the sales guys just told, here's how much you made. What we want to do is we want to bring it up front. We want them to know how much have you earned, where do you stand, as like you pointed out, and what is the gap to target. And ultimately also, when we are such a global company, having maybe hundreds, maybe thousands of spreadsheets, it's very difficult for our finance people, even today, because we have not yet rolled out to everybody, for our finance people to know what is the expected spend at the end of this year. What do you think we will spend on incentive compensation? That is not possible unless we are able to go to every person who has the spreadsheet, and most of the time we don't even know who does that. So it's been an interesting journey just to get from, as you were saying, from level 1 to level 2. That's where we will get next year, and we're looking forward to it. And it's all about knowing from a company perspective where we are, and from an employee perspective where they stand as well, all at the same time.
Yeah, that's great. I think let's stay on that for a second, because I think you guys with your global nature might be helpful for some of the prospects that are here, and even customers. Talk a little bit about the staged or phased rollout, because I think it's important that it's okay to not try to boil the ocean, and I think that's another one of those reasons. Remember I told you that people decide not stick with their spreadsheets. You get intimidated by this idea of, geez, how can I do this globally? It's just way too hard. And so a lot of companies like yourself don't do that, and they'll kind of phase it in. Maybe just spend a second on that.
Sure. I think one of the things we did was we went in a very phased approach because we wanted to, first of all, prove it to ourselves. So 1 year we did a few countries or few entities, mainly based on, are they ready for this? Do they have the right plans? Do they have the right team to be actually do it? Because we don't want to give give a car to somebody who doesn't know how to ride the bike or,
Yeah.
or one of those analogies. Like, so we made sure that we are having the right candidates for the first phase. And then on the second phase, we expanded that to more people. So we're looking at 15,000 salespeople around the world. And what makes Schneider unique is, unlike most other big corporations, where majority of the people are in one country, which is the mother country, we have our people spread across the world. We don't have 50% of the people in any one country. So we have 20%, 10%, and then the rest all over the world. So we really had to take a very piece-by-piece approach. Having said that, we want to be sure by 2020 we cover all 15,000
Yeah.
with the Exact platform.
That's great. So this is a little bit risky, Hugh, but you just sat through my presentation, which I really appreciate. Did any of it resonate with you, or did you know, like,
Yeah, well, absolutely it did, and I think paving the cow path,
Phew.
you know, I think
I'm glad you said that.
yeah, I think it's a fascinating analogy, and it yeah, absolutely resonates, because it's very difficult to get change in, and I'm kind of from seeing Paul Redmond's speech, you know, Dr. Redmond's speech this morning, to kick this off. I'm a Generation X, so I'm a miserable, grumpy old man, and so I shouldn't really like change. But I saw what the difference that could make, and I saw, and I got exposed to some very, very bright people. And I use the analogy, I'm just a two-bit salesman. I've been in sales all my life. I've loved every single minute. I've been in media sales. I've done amazing things. But you know, that was in my paradigm. That's what I sort of compartmentalized myself. And through this journey, I've met people who are what I would just call off the scale in intelligence, working, you know, to help me to change and to think in a different way. And you know, I'm not. This isn't about, you know, a sales pitch for Exactly, because ultimately that's why I'm here, to tell the story, but I tell it to absolutely anyone. We met some guys like Jason Rothbone, who works for Exactly. He's a guy who works on our commission plan. And he challenged me. He said, well, what is it you want to do? I said, well, I want the execs to drive new business. I want them to give better discounts. So I was doing all the things that you said. And he said, well, let's sit down. And we came up with a pay scheme that our business managers, there's no monthly target. You go, wow, that's amazing. There's no monthly target. And how does it work? You go, well, let's just make the pay plan drive the performance, because the business managers want to write as much money as they possibly can, so they write as much money as they possibly can in the month, and tag on the fact that if they do that and they do that at the right discount, they'll earn even more. And you go, wow. So we have, in phase one of this integration, so we're on the journey, and we've instigated that now. And rather than execs running for the hills, they kind of had to get the head around it. The most important people to get the head around it were the managers, because they're all probably like me, grumpy old men and women who are Generation Xers. You know, but the guys who are in our sales teams, you know, they've embraced that. But it's just a real different thinking. And so we've stretched ourselves and not to pave the cow path. Because what was the point? Just simply automating what we're already doing, we'd get maybe a slightly smarter version of what we had. But it's really stretched us to think differently. And I think that's really exciting. It's quite scary, and you'll scare a lot of people in the journey, but it's quite exciting at the same time.
I love that. That's great. Hey, Sudhir, for you, how about maybe you could comment on the data? I talked a lot about data. Are you guys using data yet, or is it something you want to do? How are you thinking about it?
So I think that's definitely a challenge for us, because, you know, all these countries also have their own ERPs, and as you were talking about, many systems that we're getting the data from. So it is definitely a challenge. So for me, especially around the transformation and setting that expectation for all the countries, that you're not going to go from 1 to 4 on the day that Exactly is live the next day. The expectation is, oh my God, I went from 1 to the 4. So that it's a stage approach, and it's also not that, you know, you have to complete everything in 1 to go to 2. You don't need to do that. That you'll be there. So this has been also, it's enlightening for me, and I think that's the message I will take back as well.
Yeah.
It's just that it's a journey that we need to keep progressing on.
Yeah. I know we're getting close on time here, so I want to, does anyone have a question for these two that you want to ask? Just raise a hand and I can do that. You can just yell it out. I don't see any hands yet, so I think people are enthralled with your guys' answer. So what advice do you each have for people that might be in the audience that either thinking about becoming a customer or might be brand new to it and in that, kind of paving the cow path decision, either one?
I mean, I think the biggest advice is making sure that you get as many of your stakeholders in the organisation on board. It's really important. I got really excited about it, and then you kind of I want it, and I see what you can do, and I can see the difference. But I've got to take everybody with me. So I've got to get my chief exec, and I've got to get the CFO, and I've got to get them excited about it, and then I've got tech, and you've got to get the tech team excited about it, and so it's. You have to be that change ambassador. Your transformation, that Sudhir talks about. You have to. And you have to have the resilience to go the journey, because I think everyone will try and stop you. I think that's the hardest thing is you don't get put off. Just get excited.
Yeah.
The one thing that I think it's important also, I totally agree with you here that you have to get all the stakeholders on board, and you have to have everybody participating. But I think for me, when I see when we went for the first countries live, when you actually see the salespeople and the excitement that the sales guy finally sees it on his mobile, I tell you, that's priceless. So don't ever forget that and that's what we try not to forget, because I keep telling people we're not doing this to save money, to do all of that. Why are we doing this? We are doing it so that the salesperson has the information they need to do their job. They have a hard job. And just the fact that they have it, it's just incredible. That's what drives me every time we roll this out to a new country and the salesperson says, wow. And to be surprised, I thought, they're using Salesforce. And I thought they would be enthralled that you're so well integrated with Salesforce. But no, actually they're like the PDA or mobile or whatever we want to call it. That's where they like to see it. And they go, wow, I have the information. And they show it to the other sales.
Yeah, that's game changing.
Yeah.
Well, great. I'll give one more question from each of you, and then we'll take a break here. You guys aren't going anywhere. You'll be around, so I would strongly encourage you to introduce yourself, maybe exchange contact information. And it's always great to have contacts in this space as you go down the path. You can check in and say, hey, I heard you say this. How are we doing it? But I'd be curious, you guys, I think you both started from the ICM, sort of phase of the SPM maturity, or not maturity, but the value chain. How are you guys thinking about the other products? Some of them, I think you have some of them, but how do you think about that as you think about your maturity model, how you're going to get to stage 4?
Well, again, from our perspective, it's and getting to know and building our relationship with you guys. We, because of the legislation changes and being able to move our sales model to cover completely across the UK, we've moved to a territory model, because that makes absolute sense, because we can then cover every business in the UK and offer them a market, a media channel that is right for any business. And that optimization of that is absolutely key. At the same time, we were bringing in data, so we were going to Experian and buying in their data sets. So now we were starting to measure that. So we're on the journey. It's really difficult. It's really difficult because we're on the journey in a way that feels fragmented until you put it all together. And you go, I'm doing that. I'm doing that. I'm thinking about that. As I say, I'm just a two-bit salesman, me. But suddenly, when you cram it all together, we're on that journey. And you don't realise where you are on that journey. Yeah. So I think from our perspective, we just got to keep that pushing on, because all the various facets of capacity optimization, product optimization, and and the ability to understand what the data is telling us. And data is something in our business which played such a small part. I mean, we were a radio business. We could make great radio, and we can put digital content out anywhere around the world. But we had a whole lot of spreadsheets that kind of added up what it cost us and everything else to do that. And that wasn't at the forefront. So it's trying to change that and put data at the heart of everything we do, so that we can make data-led instruction. Yeah. And so we're on the journey. Where we are on the journey sometimes is difficult to know. And I'm not quite sure I know exactly where we are right now, but we're on the journey.
Sudhir, how about you? What other things are you thinking about besides ICM?
So for us, I think what we have decided is ICM is global. We're going to be on exactly with every salesperson. For the other products, we're looking at it where it fits, right? Because some countries, some entities are much more advanced. For example, in terms of territory management in the U.S. and so on, they are more advanced, and we're looking at that. We actually implemented Obero in China because that made sense for them to do that as some part. So the other tools we are trying to implement it where it fits. We're not saying that it fits; those would fit everywhere because of where they are in the maturity model. So we're doing that more on a case-by-case basis.
Great. Well, listen, I'm sure we could go on all day, but I know you guys are getting probably ready for a break, bio and other such. I want to thank you guys so much, and again, encourage you to talk to them. Sudhir, I might mention, is also on our customer advisory board. So Bernie talked about our core values and the C in CARE that stands for customer focus. We really do listen to our customers, and there's opportunities to do that. And he's taken us up on giving us a lot of time to share detailed information and ideas on where we're going with the company. So I want to thank you for that. And Hugh, we love you as a great customer, and we're excited about all the cool stuff you're doing to transform Global. And so we look forward to all the great things that you're doing. So thanks for your guys your time, and thank you everybody.
Thank
Let's
you.
take a break
Thank you.
right now.
Cheers.